Cervantes, London, the House for Spanish Languages and Spanish and Latin American Culture here in London. Perched some 2,200 feet above the distant sea, Madrid is at once the loftiest and also the most enigmatic of Europe's capitals, hard to decipher for the Spanish and for foreigners, and if you allow me, even for Madrileños like myself alike. Its hectic character can make even all those Spaniards feel exhausted. And despite its ancient origins, Madrid feels like a modern, youthful city. Yet the legacy of Madrid's golden age remains evident in the extravagant Baroque facades of the old town. Well, these beautiful words might well be the best summary of Madrid I've ever come across, and alas, they are not mine. They belong to a good friend and admired author, Jules Stewart, who is not only a very refined enthusiast of Spain, but also a wonderfully elegant, learned, and knowledgeable writer, as shown by the excerpt I've just read out. Thanks so much, Jules, for launching your new book, this Madrid, a literary guide for travelers here at Instituto Cervantes. I must confess, I wanted to have your new book with us from the moment I knew it was going to be published. And I must also congratulate you, because if your former book on Madrid gave us the political and social history of the Spanish capital, with this literary guide for travelers, you dig deep into Madrid's intimate history, its intellectual history, and the sensibilities that Madrid has embraced or given birth to. In these last few years, Madrid has become something of a fashionable destination here in the UK, and although Jules Stewart's prose is much more than a passing fad, I can't help being glad because it will help making Madrid even more popular in Britain. And certainly the city where Cervantes, Quevedo, and Góngora could bump into each other in the street deserves to be better known, if only because, as Ramón Gómez de la Serna wrote, and we Madrileños know well, Madrid means having nothing and having it all at the same time. So thank you very much for coming, dear friends, and I hope you enjoyed your evening. Please do take some thoughts.
Thank you very much, Ignacio, for those kind words. And thank you all for coming up on this sort of note. Tower above. Let's see, to do this. I may have to revert to a crib sheet. My mind is no longer the steel trap of former days. I think I can get by without the. If you can't hear me, if you can't see the screen, let me know. And especially if you can't hear me. Looking about, I get the impression that some of you may have a very dim memory of what Madrid was like in 1962. I first landed there. But in a word, it was a horrible place. I arrived in Puerto del Sol in midsummer. I'd come to do a curso de verano para extranjeros in Complutense, which, by the way, was a very, very good course because they dropped you at the deep end. It wasn't just language, it was history, it was culture, geography, art, and so on. I think it's still offering it. Anyway, I found myself in the Puerto del Sol. It wasn't quite this era, but wasn't far from it. And my first impression was that I walked into a Goya black painting. I was confronted by two civil guards who were lovingly cradling their submachine guns under their arms, and that was a bit off-putting. The square was full of these blind lottery sellers, all chanting "Tengo 20 tiros para hoy, no la suerte," and there were loads and loads of Civil War veterans, most of them disabled, missing arms and legs, all begging. I went up to one, and I put a 50 peseta coin in his hand. He looked at me and got to his foot, and saluted. And I wondered what was that all about. Anyway, my hotel was just across the road, and I found out I was paying 60 pesetas a night because it was $1. So I gave him 50, which would be the equivalent of putting, say, 70 or 80 euros in his hand today. And I began to understand it. Anyway, I sat down, thought, what am I going to do about this place? I don't like it. I went over to the Plaza de la Marina Española just to take some shade and think things over. And suddenly a gypsy with a drum appeared behind me in tow. He had a donkey, a dog, and a little monkey with a straw hat. And he stood under the window and began beating the drum, at which point the dog jumped on the back of the donkey, the monkey on top of the dog, and there it was. And I thought, well, fine, I just left the Goya black painting and walked into the Cervantes. So, what do you do when you're very young in Madrid and have a French girlfriend? You, in July, you go to Pamplona. So I went to the San Fermines, and after a couple of days came back to Madrid with something called a spontaneous pneumothorax, which in plain English is a collapsed lung. And if you've not had one, it's not to be recommended. She said, why don't you come after I left hospital, come to my place to recover. And so I did. And then one day I got up, I was bedridden, walked around the flat and opened the wardrobe and saw these men's sport jackets that came down to roughly to my knee. And on the floor there was a box of 11 little cartridges. And I thought, what's this all about? Anyway, she came home, pale as a ghost, and said, he's found out. I said, he's found out. I said, my boyfriend. So I thought, I was your boyfriend. It turns out my boyfriend was a captain in the Civil Guard. And she said, well, the good news is that he's in hospital in traction. He had a smash up in his motorbike in Malaga. But the portero, the concierge downstairs, like most of them, was a retired cop. And he was a Civil Guard, in fact. He got the word out to him. And the boyfriend was not very happy. So I thought it would be good to put some distance between myself and Spain. And I went back to France where I'd been originally. Next, do I want another slide? Not yet, no. 2 years later I came back. That was 1964, which was 25 años de paz, 25 years of peace. Everywhere you went to Madrid, they had these great banners, 25 years of peace, celebrating the end of the Civil War, 5 years before. And it was also the year of the Apertura, one of the years of the Apertura. Thousands of tourists from Wisconsin and Stuttgart and everywhere else came pouring into Spain. And they went back raving about the country. You know, so much sun, so much sangria, it was so cheap. But there was a complaint. They complained to their tour operators that Spaniards don't smile. People in Europe generally don't smile, but let that pass. The Ministry of Information and Tourism panicked because they couldn't really afford to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So they had banners again around the city. I don't know if you remember that ridiculous smiling Pac-Man face, which they had, and they said, "Sonríe, por favor," smile, please. And then Alvaro had an idea what the censorship was like. Alvaro de la Iglesia had this wonderful satirical magazine called Acordonid. He got into his head to design a cover which said, 25 years of peace, smile please. And the magazine was shut for 3 months. Next year I was back again to do my master's this time. There was a very tense atmosphere in Spain. There was demonstrations all over the place. The Spaniards were getting quite annoyed. People in Madrid were getting quite annoyed, the middle class, because they started to travel. They'd come here for 4-day weekends, Paris, Rome, and they saw that they were being taken for a ride, basically. And so they came home, and I think this is really what achieved a peaceful transition. There was a lot of censorship. I was writing for The Guardian at that time, and the censorship was so, I mean, in a word, ridiculous, because the paper would come in, they wouldn't stop, they could always be close, they wouldn't stop the paper coming in. But if they saw any story of mine reporting on a workers' strike, student demos, anything like that, they would take a pair of scissors to it and cut it out. So all the papers went to the ministry, they cut it out and went back to the newsagents. So you open your Guardian and there was a big hole in the middle. That was all about it. Films. Last Tango in Paris comes to mind. The Spaniards were desperate to see it because it was banned. So this is where the Spanish literary picaresque tradition comes into it. Think of people like Quevedo with El Buscón, Cervantes with Ricolete Cojarillo, and who else? La Ferida de Tormes, Diego Hurtado Mendoza. His authorship has been put in doubt, but I think recent research shows that he was indeed the author. Because they all wrote in Madrid, in the Barrio Letras. But this is where the picaresque tradition came in, because then you had travel agents advertising trips to the magnificent, historic, wonderful city of Perpignan. They would organize bus tours there, and you got an all-inclusive weekend with a hotel, breakfast and everything, plus tickets to the cinema. And this was the way people managed to find out what was going on, to see these films. I was back and forth quite a bit, and in 1970, I finally settled in Madrid. Now, let me see, let me see if I can get, I'll just say some pictures of Madrid, you'll recognize that. I got a job at the Ministry of Information and Tourism as a translator. And after about a year or so, when they began to trust me, I was given Franco's correspondence to translate, which was great fun. My only regret is that had I saved it, I probably could have paid off my mortgage a lot quicker than I did. The transition began, people think it began on the 20th of November 1975 with the death of Franco. It didn't. It began on the 19th of December 1973. What comes next? There's another one. That morning, my flat's in the Barrio Salamanca. There was a great explosion about 9 o'clock. And that was the death of Carrero Blanco, and ETA blew him up. They tried to pass it off as a gas main, but that didn't quite work. I think I've got a picture of that. Yeah, there we go. How's that? That's really what put nearly the final nail in the coffin, because he relied 100% on Carrero Blanco to take over and to continue his repressive policies. And Carrero Blanco was, if nothing else, an extremely hot. He was called El Ogre for a reason. There was still a lot of venom left in the regime. You may remember the story in 1974, the horrible Salvador Puchanti, an anarchist who got into a gun battle with some policemen and killed one of them, and he was garroted. Two or three ETA militants were put in front of a firing squad about a month before Franco's death. So the regime wasn't really softening that much. But then Franco went into hospital. There we are, looking very heroic, and he was on his deathbed, and the question really was, when do we pull the plug? And nobody wanted to take responsibility for that. Finally, they decided on the 20th of November, because that was the date that José Antonio Primo de Rivera, the founder of Falange, was executed. So they thought, well, we're not going to have two commemorations, it's best to combine them both and have one. So the 20th of November. Here he's looking a bit less heroic. That could have been me with my collapsed lung. The transition itself was a rather unique phenomenon because it served as a model by using the mechanism of the dictatorship to transform Spain from a dictatorship to an authoritarian system to democracy was a model that was followed by the Soviet Union as well as Eastern European countries. And it worked very well. It worked very well until 1981, when Tejero marched his civil guards into the parliament in this kind of Buster Keaton coup. But again, that didn't really achieve anything. Nobody believed it would. And when the king went on television that night, that pretty much drew a line under it. There were things there that people, the stories as a journalist, which I was then, you got into stories that didn't really get out, like in Los Llanos, the Air Force base were fueling the fountains to hit Valencia, because Milans de Bosch had brought the tanks out in the street. The Air Force itself had plans to fly their jets to France for safekeeping. So it came quite close, but it didn't happen. The only thing I can think of that really was horribly disruptive since then, well, sorry, back again. All right, fine. The Suarez government, I have to mention that. This is really one of my favorite people. Gutierrez Mellado, who was deputy prime minister. He was a Franco general, make no mistake about it, but had a genuine change of heart. He was the one who confronted Tejero in the parliament that night and tried to take his pistol away. A machine gun from Regal, actually. And everything about him, Suarez, and the government was one day to the next. I said, it was spontaneous planning, or lack of it, if you like. I had dinner with him one night, and he came and actually prepared to speak English. Can you imagine, a Franco General? And I asked him, this was 1978, January 1978. I said, look, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people in the streets of Madrid demanding the legalization of the Communist Party. When's it going to happen? He said, with this government, it's not going to happen. And much less so with Santiago Carrillo. 4 months later, the Communist Party was legalized and Santiago Carrillo was Secretary General. So it was improvisation, but improvisation that actually worked. The Atocha bombings in 2004, I had the good or the bad fortune of being in Madrid on that day and saw what had happened. I think what really, I went out to march, of course. I think what really touched me most, and I get very emotional about this, was walking up the Calle de Alcalá. There was a young man sitting on a bench, crying his eyes out, and his girlfriend was trying to console him. He looked up and said, "Hey, me fail on humanidad. I lost my faith in humanity." And it's quite a statement. Anyway, we all know what happened to the government because they lied and they got their just desserts. And before I get into the book, I think I'll say something about the Franco legacy. Is there a Franco legacy? Well, yes, there is. It's alive and kicking, I'm afraid. There still seems to be quite a gap between Spain and the Spaniards, dare I say it. There's a lot, as Ignacio knows very well, who curated this exhibition on, what was it, the writer?
Chavez Nogales.
It's Chavez Nogales, right. Chavez Nogales was a fantastic writer, and he was unknown in Spain because during the Franco regime he was proscribed. So undergraduates had no idea who he was. The undergraduates who later became academics and lecturers equally had no idea who he was. And it wasn't only a few years ago that they disinterred him, if you like. And it's an example, I think it's an example of how the old regime mentality was still alive and kicking. But anyway, why did I write the book? I wrote the book because I think Spanish literature has been given a raw deal. If we go back to the 17th century, look at Cervantes, who was a bestseller in his own day. The book is the most widely read book in the world after the Bible, certainly the most widely read novel, translated to 50 languages. I think there's a very close relationship between a country's literature and its political situation. At that time, Spain was top dog in Europe and the world, an empire that stretched all the way around the world. You took an interest in Spain and what was going on in the country because it was the most important country in Europe. Now, if we fast forward, say, to the late 19th, early 20th century, I doubt that there are many people outside this room who would know who Benito Pérez was. Well, he was, I think, one of the great novelists of the realist school. Certainly as good, if anything, that Dickens or Victor Hugo could write. But he was ignored. He was ignored outside of Spain because Britain and France, Spain was on its back. The economy had collapsed. It lost the last of its colonies and had been defeated in a war with the United States. Nobody really cared very much what was happening in Spain. Britain and France, well, Dickens, Victor Hugo, as I said, were the people that, the writers that people read. No, not really. And why Madrid? Well, Pérez Galdós, like many, wasn't from Madrid, he was the Canary Islands, but so what? Victor Hugo wasn't from Paris and Dickens wasn't from London, that doesn't really matter. But Madrid is the place where you had to be. You had to be in Madrid to achieve literary recognition. And these are the people who really put the country on the map in those days. I think two of my favorite would be, on the extreme, Quevedo and Góngora. In the Barrio de Letras, as you said, in those days, there must have been enormous fun bumping into these people. Of course, those two had hated one another, put it mildly. You had they wrote sonnets. Góngora would write a sonnet disparaging Quevedo's poetry in sonnets. Quevedo would write another one in retaliation disparaging Góngora, but his character as well. He wouldn't set it just for his literary output. It got to a point, both of them were quite successful, where they lived around the corner from one another. Quevedo, when they came back from Valladolid, when the court moved back to Madrid, he went and bought Góngora's house and had it evicted. That's how bloody minded he could be. So Madrileños, I'm often asked, who do you most admire in Madrid? Of Madrid, historical period of now. It wasn't the King Mayor, Charles III, Carlos III, who I greatly admire. It certainly wasn't this character, Felipe II. It was him, José Barfena. José Barfena is a waiter at the Café Quicón, and he epitomizes what being a waiter in Madrid is. It's not a job, it's a profession. He also organizes tertulias, literary gatherings. You can still go and see them on a Monday, the Poets Tertulia, on a Tuesday, Vista Insula Tertulia, and he takes all of this upon himself at the Quicón, which I'm sure most are familiar with. This would be one of the literary gatherings. This is probably more what you're likely to see in the Café Quicón these days. But still, this goes on. I want to, well, again, people who write in Madrid today, the tradition still persists that very few, if any of them, are from Madrid. You have Vida Lindo is from Cádiz. Her husband, Antonio Muñoz Molina, is from Úbeda, Jaén. And to look at the red page in Cartagena, just to mention three, who moved to Madrid because you had to be there. I'd like to, if I can find the book, and I promise you I'll be brief. I'm not going to like to read too much from the book, but I think a few pages focusing on the foreigners who have written about the city, which there are many. 21st century British and American authors, like their earlier counterparts, had discovered in Madrid a magnetic attraction, be it the strange feeling of loftiness of a city isolated on a vast plateau, the striking differences in character from other Europeans, or the raw energy that keeps Madrileños on the move day and night. The best-selling author, C.J. Sampson, has been a visitor to Madrid since the early post-Franco years. Sampson found in those days, a cold, I quote, a cold, threatening place, but also much beauty and history. Today's relaxed, good-natured Madrid is his favorite city, and his wartime novel, which I can highly recommend, Winter in Madrid, looks at the dark years after Franco's victory and how ordinary people cope with extreme situations. Charles Cumming, another one, the British novelist famed for his spy thrillers, guides his characters through the most in vogue spots of Madrid in his novel The Spanish Game, whose action takes place in the city in 2003. From the Hotel Reina Victoria in the Plaza de Santa Ana, once the haunt of bullfighters, to the Café Comercial with, I quote, its famously grumpy, white-jacketed waiters. Cummings sets a scene of high intrigue for his hero, Alec Villiers. Then we have The Atocha Station, is the title of a story of Adam Gordon, a young American poet on a fellowship who arrives in Madrid in 2004, the year of the bombing. In Ben Lerner's amusing and witty novel, Leaving the Atocha Station, Gordon is there ostensibly to work on composing a long and research-driven poem about the Spanish Civil War. His, quote, research, unquote, mostly involves dodging engagements at the foundation that's funding him. And so on. There are many more, and I think, well, yeah, I mean, this is a picture I took in Malasaña last Saturday night. Which you would see, actually, I think Madrid today recognize this more. And I'll just finish by reading the end of the book. Again, back to the untouchable boundaries. Madrid, of course, survived the untouchable boundaries. This is a resilient city, one that has endured the occupation of Napoleon's army, a multiplicity of popular uprisings, coups, and revolutions, not to overlook 3 years of relentless bombardment during the Civil War. In spite of its tumultuous history, to which must be added the demands of a metropolis on the move day and night, the unforgiving extremes of climate, and the exasperating in-your-face style, Madrid is and has always been the lure for those who strive to make their name in Spanish arts and letters. And I think I'm going to end it there, and since there's so many people here, I'm sure you have questions, and I'll be glad to take any easy questions you might ask. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Will you have the book available in Spanish?
Do you know, I don't think so. I don't think so, because that's the same problem with the first book I wrote, The History of Madrid. I think they find it too narrow focus, which would sell in Madrid and probably not elsewhere in Spain. But it's a nice book. They'll probably try, but I think it's difficult in today's publishing environment.
What's your favorite spot in Madrid?
It's La Valencia.
La Valencia.
La Valencia.
And you
La
love
Valencia is a sherry bar in the Calle where if you go and ask for a beer, they'll show you the door. They only serve sherry. If you give a tip, they'll be very, very annoyed. And there are other minor house rules like no dancing and no singing and that sort of thing. But definitely La Valencia. I spend far too much time there. Yeah?
No pictures.
No, you must go. It was opened in the 1920s. They've deliberately not had a redux since then. They kept it in its original state of composition. But it is a wonderful place to go.
Do you go to Lardy sometimes?
I've been to Lardy. I never paid. I was always invited to go. And it's I haven't been for years. I mean, there's so many wonderful restaurants in Madrid now. It's really spoiled for choice. When you compare it to, say, 1962, when there was nothing, absolutely nothing. We had, even outside, Lardy was there, of course, but there wasn't really much else. So in Madrid today, if you look at the infrastructure of the city, if you look at the cultural offer, what's on offer on the cultural front, there's hardly a city in Europe that can hold a candle to it. London, of course, because it's so much bigger and so much older. But Madrid definitely is a place where you have endless choice.
What do you miss from old Madrid?
What do I miss? The fun. That's what I miss. The easy... the climate enables you to do so much that you can't do in northern European cities. This is why you walk down Calle Alcalá at night, it's not too cold, but they do put up heaters. And as someone said, you get the impression you're in the city of the homeless, because everyone's out in the streets at all hours, and they have a remarkable capacity for getting by with very little sleep. In 1986, when I was there, the year before I left, I joined what was then the EEC, and I thought the game was up. This is the end of it, no more late nights, no more 10:30 dinners and all that nonsense. It goes on, they just sleep less. And it's a great mystery. Gerald Brennan, in the 1920s, addressed this issue, and his theory was that, first of all, Madrid is a very high city, so there's lots of light that energizes you. The air is very pure and all that. So also, I mean, the life we lead, all these daily distractions and bombardment of emails and the rest of it, we find we never have time for very much. Apart from that, we know it's wrong, but we cannot do anything about it. We can't bring ourselves to do anything about it. So this creates a kind of crisis which you can only work out in your sleep, which is why we have to have 8 hours sleep. He said Spaniards are in trouble with this crisis. So they can get by with less sleep. I think it's just easygoing like Brian.
Given you said that the rise of Spanish writers, obviously Spanish was connected with the golden period of Spanish economic dominance. Since we're seeing Spain, now fairly economically strong, I mean, excepting the last recession, country in Europe. Are we also seeing a comparable rise in literature again?
Definitely. You look at the translations of people like Maria Dueñas and others, Arturo Pérez Reverte. These people have been translated into 15 or 20 languages, and they're read and appreciated and respected. So I would say yes. Yes, we are seeing the renaissance, if you like. It's not, it happened yesterday, it's been going on for a number of years now. That Spanish literature is coming back into its own, also because people are more focused on Spain. I mean, let's face it, 40 million tourists go to Spain every year. So it's well, truly on the map. Yes?
What would you tell those young people in Spain, like mainly out of Podemos, that think that the transition was a failure and it was the continuation of the Franco regime with a different sort?
Well, it's a lot of nonsense, really, because how can you compare? Suarez was a man of the regime, but he realized he was intelligent enough to know this could not carry on. Spain was isolated. If Spain is not taken seriously on the political stage today, it's precisely because of that. Because after the Second World War, they were not in the UN, they were not in the IMF, they were not in the EEC, they were not in the World Bank. They didn't belong to any of these great organizations that were formed in Europe after the war. And so they suffered for 40 years. It was isolation. So it's very, very difficult to bring Spain back into on the center stage. But as for the region, let's see why. Why did you say it's a failure?
Well, this is because they think that it was the same people who took the power, let's say, who kept the power after Franco, and they changed like just the image of it, but it wasn't the same. But obviously it's a very left-wing position.
Yeah, I mean, less and less so. But you have elections every 4 or 5 years. You can vote people out of office. You can choose between 4 or 5 mainstream parties, other parties. Certainly, the regional autonomy system has worked very well, with one exception. And I'm pretty sure that will be sorted out. So I don't think that I would like to stand up, frankly. I don't think Spain, that many countries in Europe, I don't get the feeling that Spain is any more stricter, but there's just liberty in Spain than anywhere else. Yes?
It's you're saying that Madrid is one of the cultural cities of the world. Is that matched by its university?
It's got 3 universities, I think.
Are they leading universities in the world? And if not, why?
No, point well taken, really. No, I think education has suffered. It has suffered because of the legacy. And it's obviously, I mean, it's getting better. Spain is exporting world-class architects and engineers and doctors, people like that. But in the country itself, I still think that the education system has to be modernized and has to be upgraded. University system.
Thinking about the golden age, particularly of drama, and how that is sort of very parallel with Shakespeare in this country, is there as much of a movement in terms of those plays being a body of work that's sort of constantly refreshed and represented and performed in different ways, in the way that we're familiar with Shakespeare being reinterpreted and sort of constantly on the stage here? Is that the same in those sort of works from the Golden Age?
Well, there's a lot of it from Teatro Real and Teatro Español, as we saw. They do put on a lot of classical works. And I forgot to mention that when I said that Cervantes was the most best-selling novelist, Lope de Vega's plays at that time, Spain was so important, Lope de Vega's plays were sent to that well-known English dramatist, William Shakespeare. And he read them as well. Not his plays, his sonnets. Sorry. Yes. You can easily see, I think, 2, perhaps 3 classical works in Madrid any time of year. Yes?
Why don't you live in Madrid?
Why? Because I came to London to meet Helen. It took about 5 years. Why? I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about that lately. Ask me next year. No? Any questions? Yes.
You say a lot of the writers are not from Madrid.
Most of them are not from Madrid.
But who in the 20th century, just to shorten it, will be the true Madrileño writer?
Julián Marías is, I don't know if he's Gato. Gato means third generation Madrileño. But he's certainly hardcore Madrid. Camila José Cedro, you've got me there. I don't think so. I don't think so. Gallego, of course, that's right.
I always think of, La Colmena as
Yeah, he wrote about Madrid, which is why I included him.
typical, 100% Madrileño.
Yeah.
Someone, especially someone who's not from Madrid.
Yeah.
I think, no, that's Madrid.
No, that's why I included him in the book, because the criteria was either an author from Madrid or an author who writes about Madrid. Yes.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to be a journalist and write into stories?
Don't try to get on the property ladder, because it's a path to slow starvation. You want to write about Spain for British media?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite competitive. We can just we're having a drink there, we can discuss it. Yes.
What do you think about Barcelona?
Barcelona is a magnificent city. It's I've not been there that often because my life was in Madrid. But the times I've been there, I mean, I acknowledge that it's a much older city than Madrid. It's got a longer history. It's got fantastic architecture. It's got a beach, and it's got very nice food and all that. Anyone here from Barcelona? Anyway, I think what it lacks are the people. I really do. I get on very well with Madrileños. I'm not sure about Barceloneses. I'm not sure. I don't know very many, but I feel more comfortable with it, in a word.
Any other citizens who would like to live in Spain?
Cadiz.
Yes, I was 1 year.
Yeah, you're from Cadiz?
No, I was there 1 year.
Yeah. No, Cadiz, I'm trying to persuade my publisher to let me write a history of Cadiz. It's, for those who don't know it, it's the oldest city in Europe. And it's an absolute gem. An absolute gem. It's so much maritime and military history. It's really worth looking into, and it's not been done. Yeah, I think, well, we have a flat in Pamplona.
No,
And,
I'm from Pamplona.
no, Pamplona, right. Well, we're in the Castelletto in Calderería. Yeah, very noisy. And, but we love it because it's such a lively city. I mean, comparing, say, the festival in Pamplona with Cadiz, two different worlds. Cadiz was great fun, we were there for the carnival, but it's kind of soft and very local, whereas Pamplona is bang, 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 constantly. But it's very good, and when it's not that, it's a very tribal society. By that I mean that they're very conscious of their history as an ancient kingdom, of being different. You can say, well, Burgos, Valladolid, León are all wonderful cities, but they're Castilian cities with similar structure and people. Getting dangerous waters here, but anyway. But Pamplona is different. Society is different, and it's an extremely prosperous city with a small population, which helps very much because they haven't got the population pressure and they haven't got the unemployment pressure. So I find it an ideal place to live. And I go there once a month. Yes?
Sounds like you've got a really rich history of living in Madrid. I didn't know where to start when you wrote the book.
Well, I started more or less at the beginning. When I wrote the history, I started at the beginning. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, well, how did you structure
straight up and down from the conquista, the conquest of Spain, up into Moldova and beyond. He's got a new film coming out, by the way. No more questions? Okay, if no more questions, then we'll draw a line into that one. I'll be happy to talk to anyone afterwards. Thanks very much for coming.